In this lecture, guys, we wanted to start learning about the null object and how to drive several layers or how to animate several layers according to a single anchor point. The point here is the anchor point and how to use the null object. I like that. Okay, so let's see how we can do this. So we have here three layers coming with a certain animation from top, just the position. Then notice how they are turning all together like if they were all connected. There is no pre-composition here, guys. Let's see how we can do that without using pre-comps. So here I have a composition where the three text layers are coming down using the position animation. If you select the three layers, press P, you notice that only the animation is being used. Fine. Now I want to rotate them and take them out to the left. If I open the rotation and rotate them, each will rotate according to its own anchor point. And that's not exactly what we want. I will undo this. We want to rotate them according to a single anchor point. Now we can create a shape layer here and then we can connect them all to the shape layer and stories like this. But After Effects, there is a special object that we can use here. We can come to layer and say new and say null object. Null object is an object that really doesn't exist. It means it will not render in your final video. You will never see it in your videos. You can see it here, of course. And it has its own layer and it has its own transformation. The purpose of the null layer is to connect or parent layers to the null layer and then animate the null layer and all the other layers will follow. We have already seen that with different kinds of layers where we animated the shape layer and we parented the other baby layers or children layer to that shape layer and we moved everything. But in the null layer here, the null layer is invisible and that's the power of it. Cool. Let's take all our layers and parent them to the null layer. If we open the rotation now of the null layer, we can keyframe the rotation, come after 1 second, whatever we want, and rotate them. Now notice all the layers are rotating according to the anchor point of the null layer. And this is very practical and actually it's very powerful. You can use it to animate the robots that we have seen. Then after some time, I want to use the position. So I come after 1 second, for example, keyframe the position. And then at the end here, I will just move the position to the outside of the null layer. Here you are. So now you have used a null layer and you notice I cannot see the null layer if the eyeball is on or off. And then it will drive all the other layers. It's totally like parenting, visual parenting, but using a layer that will not render. Fine, you notice that the null layer is among the solids layer here. It means it's a solid layer, but it doesn't have any colors or any appearance at all. Fine, something else I need to bring it to your attention. If you want to put motion blur, you cannot simply put motion blur on the null layer. Though it is the null layer that's being animated, the other layers will not have any motion blur. You need to enable motion blur for every layer that you want to see motion blur for. And here you are, the motion blur is enabled for the comp here for you to see it. And we have now a nice motion blur. So the motion blur has to be enabled for the layers that you want to see motion blur for and not for the null layer. And notice it is quite powerful because if I give motion blur only to the null layer and there are layers I don't want to have a motion blur, then I cannot do that if it was all driven by the null layer motion blur. Now, thanks very much for listening. This was a small note. Null layers are very important. Please go to After Effects and try to play with the null layers, see what you can do, try to use the scale and the other animations. And I will see you in the next lecture.